Oh, that was a smooth one. That was nice.
Mm.
That didn't feel abrupt or anything. I like
Mm.
it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a Fifth Wall Friday Hotcakes. Andy, I didn't have hotcakes this week. I actually made waffles, and I haven't had waffles in a long time, and man, so good. I don't know what you do in the South. My mom's from the Midwest, and we put peanut butter on our waffles. I don't know if that's a thing you do, or if
Come on
that's
with it.
but it's so
Yes.
funny because I live on the
Yes.
East Coast, and whenever I bring that up to my friends locally, they're like, "Oh, that's so weird. Why would you do that?"
No,
It's
bro.
like, "Why would
No,
you have a
that's where it's at.
boring?"
That's
Yeah, exactly.
that's where it's at. As a matter of fact, I'll take it to the next level. We did have hotcakes this week, by the way. We did have peanut butter with syrup and bananas on top, right? That's the way
Beautiful.
my family rolls. But so we've got
Sugar
another
on
deal.
sugar
We'll
on
do
sugar on protein.
that's it. There you go, right? With some potassium on top.
Just a
But we
little bit.
do crescent rolls, right? Crescent rolls. And then we'll go ahead and do the peanut butter and syrup and
Interesting.
just make it into a mix. Call it special sauce. I have no idea why. But yeah, that's we go ahead and mix the peanut butter with the syrup and then dip the crescent roll in it, right? Probably why
I'm
we
about
have a
it.
lot of diabetes in the South. Maybe
Yeah,
related, maybe not.
I mean, sugar. No one really knows anymore. It's probably corn syrup. That's what does it. Anyway, not getting on the health kick. Cool. So today we're actually going to take a slightly different approach than we usually do. Usually we are talking about like something in the news, some headlines, different components like that. Also, Andy, is my mic too hot or does it sound good? Where we at?
No, you're
Not
good. You're
peaking.
good on my side, man.
Great.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So we're not going to talk about like any current events or anything like that today. Instead, we're going to focus on uh, misconceptions, misinformation around cyber insurance, and part of that is just because we've been seeing a lot of it, and not just this year. I mean, this has been going on. I kind of made a post about this yesterday, right? The rumor mill around cyber insurance. People get real like they just want to talk about. It's like when MGM got hacked. That had nothing to do with cyber insurance, but it was everyone wanted to talk about it for months at a time, right? And I feel like anytime something in the insurance news space happens, people all immediately start to speculate about what's going to happen. And at least to date, I don't think any of those speculations have really come to pass. I mean, like you had the travelers denied claim back in 2022, and that led to very few denied claims in the future because most people realized, oh, I should probably mark my security right. And then you had the rumor that cyber insurance was going to be insolvent come 2023, and we know that's not the case. In fact, I think we saw some stats that cyber insurance is set to uh, surpass commercial property by like 2015 or 2025 or 2032 or some random number. I don't know. Don't hold me to that. Jason Rory, thanks for saying hi, man. You just show up as a LinkedIn user on here for some reason. Don't really understand why, but Jason Rory, awesome, love it. So all that to say, we want to go into some of these more specific, and this is for our MSP partners, specific around VCISOs, MSPs, MSSPs, people whose clients are, you might be bringing up cyber insurance to your clients, or your clients might be not super thrilled about the idea of going and finding a cyber insurance policy. And you tend to get some objections, and they tend to be the same thing. And they're usually built around some misconceptions around who cyber insurance is for, how it protects people, those kind of things. So we're going to cover those. But Andy, anything you want to add before I go into actual misconceptions?
No, I just think that this is a good thing to cover occasionally because something pops up, right? We've become a very I don't even conspiracy based society, right? Like everybody wants to have their hot button thing that they're all stirred up about, and I call it the boogeyman, the cyber boogeyman. There's stuff that I hear all the time at conferences, and people ask me, and I'm like, man, I literally have never seen that happen in 5 years. Like I do this every day, and I hadn't seen it happen once in 5 years. So that, and then also shout out Jason. Jason is a veteran, and there was a veterans event at the Houston Astros game I saw on LinkedIn, and Jason got to go out and be on the field and was recognized. So thank you for your service, and also thank you for not taking my dare to dress like Megan Thee Stallion when she threw out her first pitch last year.
I saw, that's awesome. Jason, thank you for your service. And I saw a post yesterday that was saying, imagine we brought celebrities on to throw the closing pitches of a game
The
rather than the
last
starting
pitch.
pitches of the game.
Yeah.
It's almost like this kind of thing that you run into. Imagine, it's like, I think the post said, "All right, bases are loaded, 2 strikes, bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, 2 strikes. Here comes Danny DeVito."
Yeah. Oh, it's Steve Urkel. Yeah, no doubt.
Steve Urkel. Oh my gosh, he's so funny. Anyway, we're gonna dive into some of these misconceptions, and this is, to be fair, like this is. I have kind of rare moments where I get ticked off about things, but there's been a lot of concepts. I'm not going to point any fingers or name any names. It's just people are, and I don't put it past people. I mean, when you're trying to push a product or you're trying to establish yourself in the
Right.
space, you're going to elevate what you do. And on our end, the reality is like, yeah, you know what? If I want to talk about fifth wall, I want to talk about cyber insurance, I'm going to make cyber insurance sound like the greatest thing on the planet. We recognize cyber insurance is stressful. We recognize there's kind of a bit of a lift to get a policy in place that needs to happen. It's not
Right.
just this push button get banana solution, but that's really important to keep in mind, because if you're gonna look for a push button get banana solution that's covering your entire business from a cyber attack, you might want to look for a little more than a push button get banana. And that's
Yeah.
just the reality of the situation. So we're going to go into some of these, and we're going to just kind of work through them. The first one is that cyber insurance is a scam. Cyber insurance doesn't pay out. Andy, what do you think about this?
Yeah, this has been around for a long time. And again, you mentioned the travelers deal, right? So
I
well,
think that was
let's
the
first
big
of all,
one.
that
That
was
like
yeah, that
really
was the
triggered
big
it.
one. And it kind of got everybody talking. It's been out there for a couple of years, you know. First of all, let me say this, right? There are two things going on here. Okay. Two separate issues that we need to address right out of the gate. Number one, your application, your formal attestation about what's going on with your network, all of that good stuff. Be truthful. Don't lie, right? Second of all, how much insurance to buy, right? Sit down with somebody who can quantify your risk based on your revenue, your sector, advise you on what average losses look like in your sector at your size, and don't just go out and buy something. Okay. Now that we've talked about those two things, in Andy's experience, when people have been honest on their application and when people have quantified their risk properly and bought appropriate insurance, right? How many times have I not seen cyber pay out in my insurance career? Not a single time. Not once, right? So those are the key things, right? Don't just go out and buy whatever, right? Be honest on your application, buy a policy that fits your risk. If you don't know what your risk is, find somebody who can help you quantify that, right? And go buy proper insurance. And when that's happened, when claims have come in, those claims have paid out.
I want to circle back to that at the end of this, but there's one piece you made that I think is really good, and it's that cyber insurance not paying out. Yes, the clear one is I don't have the right security controls in place, and therefore I lied. I
Mhm.
misrepresented myself on my application. Something we deal with this in the MSP space a lot, and I don't blame. I mean, we live in a world of automation where we want things to be very easy. We want things to just to read to keep us accountable, um, and that's great, right? But for the history of insurance, like since its inception, insurance has always been a good faith agreement based on a contract, right? So when you fill out that application, you are filling out your end of the contract and you're saying, I have these things. I attest to having these things. So regardless of you have some platform that tells you on whether or not they got turned off, or if you have the ability to make sure you actually have those things in place, when you sign that form, you are saying, I agree to having these things and I signed my name to it, right? I have signed my name to having those things. So if you now have an incident and the policy or the forensics team comes in, and kind of sub misconception here, forensics does not come in to try and figure out how to not pay the claim. That's not what forensics is
Right.
doing. Right. So let's keep that in mind. Forensics doesn't come in to say, oh man, well, Andy Insurance told us to come in here and try and find some way in which we can deny paying this claim. So that's what we're going to do. That's not what forensics does. Forensics is coming in to determine the original point of entry and how far reaching this claim is so that they know who needs to be notified, who needs to be brought in. Does credit monitoring need to be engaged? There's a lot that has to happen, right? So forensics is determining all that. But if they happen to uncover that this incident happened because in the traveler's incident, MFA was turned off, but they claimed that they had it on when they didn't. And not even just that, they determined MFA was never turned on for the
Never
whole
turned
life
on.
of the policy.
That's right.
So that's a huge misrepresentation. This wasn't some error where a tech came in and turned it off because they were troubleshooting. This was a blatant misrepresentation of their security posture. So when you sign your name to that contract, that is you saying, not only do I have these things now, but I agree to uphold these things through the life of the policy. Now, we understand technical glitches happen, right? But most of the time, it's usually a misrepresentation thing. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch on that. Go ahead.
No, I was saying like two boots on the ground examples that I've seen, like actual things, not a hypothetical, but actual things I've seen. Hospital system, former IT guy, now fired IT guy, right? Went through their insurance application. Do you do XYZ? Went through and just went, yes, 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 yes. Purposefully to get a better rate because he had been told to try to get the cheapest insurance he could get. So he went through and said they did a bunch of stuff that they didn't do, right? Now, they didn't have a claim, but when we were consulting on that, we had found out that he had done that. Had they had a claim, it probably wouldn't have paid. Other thing, right? Client consistently wiring between $50,000 and $75,000. Like that's happening regularly, right? They go buy an insurance policy from their local broker down the road, a guy that they had been buddies with for a long time. Well, that policy clearly stated that it only covers $5,000 of funds transfer fraud, right? They get popped. Lady wires 65 grand to a bad actor. They file a claim. Guess what? They got 5 grand. That's what it said from the beginning, right? So now
Yep.
here comes the talk track. Cyber insurance doesn't pay. No, cyber insurance paid. It paid exactly what it said it was going to pay, right? And those
Yep.
are two
That's the key.
actual examples that I've seen, in the wild.
Yep. That's what I was going to say is, I mean, if you don't, you need to understand your risk and what you're at risk of losing in the event of an incident, and then hope that your policy covers all, if not the majority, if not all of that, right? I mean, that's the difference is we're not looking at, oh yeah, I have cyber insurance, that means I'm covered, right? I mean, but I just thought of something, right? When we think of the security control piece, right? I mean, you can think of if you're just checking yes to everything, imagine doing that on a life insurance policy. You check yes to everything, you still got to go to the doctor and get a checkup, right?
That's right.
And
Yep.
at the end of the day, I mean, that's where our MSP partners, fifth wall coming in on the conversation. It's really like that checkup you have to do before you actually get the insurance because you could say a lot, but that might not be the case. So let's actually verify those things are true and see if maybe there's some other health benefits you can get in the process, right? I mean, that's kind of the mindset there. It is a we're so used to auto and business property where it's like these
Mhm.
very set in stone specific check boxes that have to happen that have no gray area to them, and that's just not the case with cybersecurity. So, cyber insurance does pay out. To Andy's point, have the right policy that actually covers your risk, and don't misrepresent yourself on those applications. And I think that's super key to all of this. But it's not just that it's a scam; it's also slow. So cyber insurance takes too long to pay out. This is a recent one, especially with the emergence of warranties and different things like that. I mean, I wouldn't even say like recent. I've had calls over the past couple of years with people talking about warranties, saying like, "Oh, the warranty can cover your deductible, or the warranty pays you this lump sum of cash right away." And the piece I want to clarify here is that cyber insurance, not all of that $1 million in coverage is meant to be money that just falls into your lap, right? It's slow to pay out because at the end of the day, I wouldn't even call it slow to pay out as much as it's you're just not getting a lump sum of $1 million that you have no idea what to do with, right? It's
Mhm.
more you are getting you have services that are being funded by that cyber insurance policy, so you don't even have to worry about it. Is that fair to ask or say?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old male athlete, right? It'd be like my son coming to me and going, "Hey, Dad, this weight program's taken a long time for me to get stronger." Yeah, it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, right? Cyber insurance, by its design, good cyber insurance has 6 months of reputational harm built in there, right? So what does that mean? You have a breach, you're back up in 15 days, right? So from that 15th day, 6 months out, right? We're going to sit there and we're going to look at the books and we're going to see how much revenue is lost. We're going to go back through emails where people maybe have said, "Hey, we're leaving. We're not comfortable with you guys anymore." and there's a longer drawn out process. You get into forensics, you get into call centers, notification costs. So like good cyber insurance, right, to pay out in full should take a long time because it's going to allow the whole process to fold out. Everybody that's been through a breach know that a breach doesn't stop the day that you're back up and running, right? Let that whole process full out or play out and then fully indemnify you from it up to 6 months in advance.
Yeah, that's a great point. And before we move into the next one, right? Because I think it is really important to understand that, like you said, there's these things that need to kind of be understood and you get reimbursed as opposed to here's a lump sum of money, figure out what to do with it, right? There's all
Right.
that, but we're kind of going through some specific uh, objections you might get from clients, misconceptions you hear around cyber insurance. All these things kind of play into the same realm. If you're listening in today, I mean, we got a good chunk of people on here today. So if you're listening in, what have you heard? What have you heard when you bring up the cyber insurance conversation with your clients? I'm curious because I mean, I think we're going through some of the more common ones, but there are always some fun ones out there too. So if you are listening in, when you breach that subject of cyber insurance, whether you're an agent or an MSP, what are you hearing? Curious. Uh, yeah, so that's kind of so again, cyber insurance is slow, but here's one of my favorites, Andy, and I'm gonna kind of hand this one over to you to start because I know what I would say, but um, my business is too
Oh,
small to be a target.
oh. Oh, how long do we have? Is this a is this 15 minutes, 30 minutes? Yeah, and I mean, listen, there was a time when that might have been more true. I'll never say that it was just universally true, but if you want to rewind back to 2017, 2018, right? Like, was that more true then than it was now? Yeah, but COVID took, and I mean, we say this all the time when we talk about COVID, it's not a medical or a political opinion. It's a marker in time in cybersecurity history, right? The remote work that was associated with that, all the vulnerabilities that came out, it completely and totally changed the landscape. And now, not only are small size businesses targets, right? They are the target. The vast majority of claims submitted to insurance come from the small side of the small to medium business definition. So, yeah, I'm glad you had that ready to go, man, because that's honestly, that was the chart that was playing in my brain. I mean, if you look at there's over 5,000 claims submitted here. Actually, there's more than that. It looks like there's about 6 or 7,000. 3,900 of them came out of the 1 to 25 million bracket in revenue.
Yeah, still a small pool, but at the same time, I mean, that's enough to show that this is not some anomaly of a survey. You know, this isn't one or two
Right.
outliers there with a ton of money. It's like 4,000 of the known victims were hit with or had between 1 million and 25 million in revenue, right? So
Mhm.
um, that's just it's a really important piece to take away here that your small business, it's not about you being a target. I say this all the time. We call it fishing for a reason, right? And you know, I live by the beach. I live about, I don't know, 5 minutes away from the bay, so I can take a walk down to the pier. I can take a snapper pole. I can cast it off and try and catch some fish. Right. When I do that, I pick the right lure. I pick the right type of reel. Hopefully the right type of line. I mean, with snappers, who cares? They're pretty small, but you know, beside the point. Right. So you're fishing with a targeted fish in mind. You're going to use a different pole than you would a striped bass or something like that, right? So that's more spear fishing. You're targeting what you're doing. But general fishing kind of goes back to those, like, you know, ancient times where they would just cast a net off the side of a boat and just pull in whatever they can.
See what they
And
got. Yep.
that's what uh that's what the threat actors are doing. And when you think of these really large companies, a lot of them are investing a lot in secure email gateways that are really cutting. Like when I worked in the financial industry, I had ridiculous layers of cybersecurity built into what I would do every day. No small business I ever had been a part of prior to that had anything remotely like that. Right. So you look at these larger companies, sure, they're a target, but they also usually are investing tons of money into their cybersecurity because they're a target. Whereas you have smaller businesses, they're saying, I'm not a target. Meanwhile, they're the ones getting fished. Right. So
Yep.
really important statistical numbers there.
Yep. And a sidebar to that objection, I'll add to that. I'm too small to be a target. Sometimes you'll hear a combo
Mm,
statement of we're too small and we're too rural, right? Like we're located in the middle of nowhere. They're not coming for us, And it's really funny how traditional attitudes around physical crime have bled over into new age attitudes about cybercrime that don't apply at all. I had a good buddy,
yeah.
and I hope he's not listening because he'll know immediately who he is. We were at a program one time, and he runs a manufacturing business here around here. And he was like, man, like I don't have to worry about this. I'm in little old blankety blank Arkansas, right? And I was like, how much revenue are you guys doing? And he was like, we finished last year around between 38 and 40 million. And I was like, not only do you have to worry about it, I said that the average ransom demand, this was back when the average ransom demand was around $250,000. I was like, you're going to be around 2 or 3 million. Like, not only do you have to worry about it, you have to worry about it exponentially more than the average person based on your revenue, because that's what matters. Your location doesn't matter at all. I saw a deal that Chase Cunningham did one time, on LinkedIn, where he just went in and chose a known vulnerability, picked a sector, roped off a area of like a county in Texas or whatever, and went, here's how many healthcare entities have this vulnerability in this 100-mile radius or what. And I was going, it was a major eye-opening moment for me as a person who doesn't
Oh,
come
for
out of tech.
sure.
I was like, oh my gosh, it is that easy.
Yep. No, it totally is. So here's one. Jason Rory again, or AKA LinkedIn user. I have cybersecurity insurance already. It's part of a
mm,
BOP or GL policy. This goes
mm,
back to what we were saying before. I'll bring it up. I'll bring up that other one. Where are we? Captions. That goes back to the whole cyber insurance doesn't pay out piece that we talked about, where you're not
yeah,
having the right, you don't have the right coverage for yourself. But it's a little different because you're not saying it doesn't pay out. This is almost an excuse not to pursue comprehensive coverage, because when they're saying, "Hey, I have cyber," my agent told me to check a box. They asked if I wanted it. I was like, "Sure, that sounds good." So they checked a box, added it to my BOP, added it to my GL. Those are usually really cheap. And I'll say this: the majority of insurance agents worth their salt in the cyberspace will never recommend one of these to you. The only reason you might be recommended this is if your budget is absolutely at nothing and they're just like, you know what, at this point you need something, so get something. But the majority of agents I know of who dabble in the cyberspace will not point you towards this, and if they do, run away. That's what I was.
yeah. Yeah, 100%. And
Thoughts
man, I
there,
mean,
Andy?
the sad reality of it is, I mean, go back to that rural example, right? You've got a business that's highly successful, that's built itself from the roots, and they've gone from a startup to a 40-50 million dollar entity, right, in a rural area. Well,
Yep.
they've been with the same agent forever, right? I've seen folks that are kicking in 40, 50, 60, 70 million dollars of revenue that are still on a BOP cyber policy, and they have 250K of coverage, sub limit of $50,000 for ransomware. I mean, we consulted an auto dealer one time that was doing, they were doing roughly, 4 to 5 million a month in revenue. They had a ransom payment addendum that was 50K and business income at 250,000. I mean, like literally they had hours of business income coverage, right? Not days. To me, when I hear that, and thank you, Jason, for throwing that in, I think it's a phenomenal point, because you do hear that objection quite a bit. We call it the warm and fuzzies, right? Like the business gets the warm and fuzzies because their guy that, they had beers with at SMU back in the day, like he told them they were good, so they're good. But that's maybe not beers at a Christian university. Sorry. Well, I maybe could have picked a better, who knows? But anyway,
Dude, I
that
went to
those warm.
Gettysburg College, and this it's gonna
There
sound terrible. I went to Gettysburg College, which was a party school. Messiah, right up the street, is a Christian
Yep.
school, dry campus, and the number of times I busted kids as an RA who were
Yeah.
from Messiah College that were just on
Yeah.
our campus. It happened. Anyway,
So maybe
little
maybe
side
it was a
note.
maybe it was a great example. I
Great
don't know.
analogy. It's
But
perfect.
anyway, point being, it comes to me, it comes back to risk quantification. And I sound like I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but like that is a major gap in our industry, is good, solid risk analysis and risk quantification. And that's where guys like, not, and I'm again not shilling for fifth wall here. It's just where the MSP and the insurance agent at any level can work really, really well together is not just educating them on where their risk lies, like where the gap is, but how much that risk would potentially mean on
Yeah,
average if they were down for 15 days.
bingo. No, that's fantastic. So good. Now for the fun one, Andy, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to you because you're the one who's spent a lot more time in the agent space actually trying to help people get the cyber insurance policies. I mean, you get a lot of frustration. What I can do is paint the picture of the history. We all know, right? Before 2020, cyber insurance was really easy to get. Wes
Hmm.
Spencer famously coined it like Oprah, saying, "You get a policy, you get a policy, you get a policy." It was very easy back in the day. Um, not the case anymore, right? So a lot of people, I think, are victims of that 2020, 2021 toss up and are just, they clocked out, they're mentally out when it comes to cyber insurance because they had this one time where it was just really annoying and it was a pain in the butt and they just stepped out. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so let's kind of divide that into twos. Let's talk about get and maintain. So let's talk about like if I'm a cyber, I mean if I'm a company and I'm going out, I don't have cyber insurance today and I want to go get it, right? Is it hard to get, right? Um, Guys, something that covers a risk this important should be appropriately hard to maintain, right? Like we learned our lesson from COVID, right? Back in the days of no underwriting, where we're not asking anything about the network at all, right? I mean, the insurance industry learned a really, really good lesson through that. Some questions need to be asked. There is a level, there is a depth that it should be difficult, right? Like you shouldn't be able to go, no, I'm not a marijuana shop. No, I hadn't had a loss in the last 2 years. Oh, here's my revenue. Here's my employees. Oh, you get a quote. We're 30 seconds in. Here's you a quote. That shouldn't happen anymore, right? We
Yep.
should be asking better questions than that. Now, does it have to be I've got to fill out 5 paper apps that are 20 pages each and ask questions about 24/7 sock services? No, it shouldn't be that either. So it should be, in my mind, to get it, it should be appropriately difficult. And that reality is somewhere in between. The pendulum swung way too far. We started off and it was insanely easy, right? Like there were no questions being asked. The underwriting was terrible. When you look at it from a insurance underwriting standpoint, you go back to those days, it was like, God, that's embarrassing that we were even in that moment, right? But then we overcorrected, right? It's like the parent
Yep.
that finds out that their kid's doing things wrong and they like strip them of everything, right? Like we went down to like these crazy long apps and you have to fill out the CFC app to get a CFC quote. You got to fill out the Tokyo app to get a Tokyo quote. And they're all 20 pages and ask all these inane questions. That's too much, right? So reality should be somewhere in the middle as far as like getting the insurance.
Yep.
When it comes to maintaining it,
Well,
right?
hold on before we get to
Is
the
it go
maintain
ahead?
side.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Yes, pop in.
with the barrier of entry piece, and it's something that um, I think I mentioned this yesterday in the post, is that and you kind of hinted at it, but if something is easy to get, right? Typically, especially in the cybersecurity space today, and that goes back to what Jason Rory said, right? I have a BOP, I have a GL policy, very easy to get, right? And then you going all the way back to what you were saying about having the right limits to protect your business and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if your risk hasn't been adequately understood, if someone hasn't taken the time to really understand what you should be covered for, you're leaving yourself open for some severe disappointment. So it's like, yeah, it's annoying, yeah, it's frustrating, but also, I mean, even getting it, the objection to not get it, right? It's like, I
Mhm.
don't care who you are. There's the classic, we don't have a lot of data, right? That's a big one. We don't really have private data. That's not our thing. You have internet exposure. Your system is online. Most people, if I've never heard in this day and age of a business that has zero internet exposure or access,
Right,
right?
right.
So even if you're emailing, business email compromise is huge right now because it's so easy to click something you're not supposed to and now your entire email account's compromised. I mean, it's not like it's just about a ransomware attack. There are so many different layers and levels to attacks, and having a policy that covers the gamut is really important. But of course, then getting it is going to be tough, but you should
Real
go
hard.
get it because the reality is you have internet exposure. So that's the easy piece. So
Yep.
anyway, you got it. Good job. Now what?
Well, and that, by the way, that reminds me, I don't know why this popped into my head, but there was one time when I was in college where I was pumping gas and this unmarked van like pulled up right by us really quick and they slid the door open. They were like, "Hey, you guys want some speakers? Look, $50, And I was like, I'm good, right? Because I mean, if you think about it, did I have to drive to the store? Those really nice speakers. Did I have to drive to the store? No. Normally, I would pay $500 for them. They're only $50.
Those were
There's
hot.
some red flags going off there of like, man, the ease of acquisition here, something's up, right? And the same thing applies to cyber. So
Those were
anyway,
definitely some hot
maintaining.
speakers
No,
for
oh,
sure.
who knows where they came from, right? Talking about maintaining it and keeping it, right? Yes. Okay. So let's be honest. Let's call a spade, right? Are the underwriting guidelines or the carrier requirements, are they becoming more stringent, right? Yes, they are, right? There are things that are required by carriers in 2024 that were not required in 2029 or 2021 for that matter, right? Carriers weren't talking about EDR 3 years ago, right? Now, personally, do I feel like carriers currently are doing anything or requiring anything that is just wildly out of step financially for the size of the organization? Like if a carrier asks or says that they want to see MDR, like are they asking a $750,000 flower shop in the middle of nowhere, Iowa for MDR? No, we're not seeing that, right? But, are you going to have to keep in step with good cybersecurity practices to maintain your insurance or maintain your deductible or maintain your premium? Yeah, you are, and to your point, you mentioned health insurance in the past, and other types of insurance, car insurance, right? There's some checkpoints along there, right? Like if you need to be doing the things that you're supposed to be doing to maintain that coverage, right?
Yep, 100%.
So
And you know what?
no difference there.
To that point, I put a little ticker at the bottom there, but stringent doesn't just mean strict; it also means precise, right? And
Right.
so what we've seen unfold over the past couple of years is you had carriers say, "You don't need any security. We'll give you a cyber policy." Realized that was a mistake, so they started to kind of correct, right? And they said, "Oh, you need MFA," without defining MFA. They just said, "Does the
Right.
client have MFA?" As if it was this thing that you just turn on, right, everywhere. Or one button turns it on for all things, right? They didn't really
Right.
give any definition around it. Then they became more precise on what they required around MFA. Then they started asking about next gen antivirus that migrated or evolved to EDR, then 24 by 7 MDR. Like these things grow, and part of that is one of the things we don't. We run into this a lot with MSPs. Is they're saying like, hey, do cyber carriers stick to any kind of framework like CIS or CMMC? Like where are they at? Are we looking at NIST? Like what about HIPAA? Am I supposed to be HIPAA compliant for my HIPAA people? Like, what's the deal? So, and usually, I mean, they might ask questions like that, but the reality is that the barrier to entry for cyber carriers is based on their own historic claims data,
Mhm.
right? So they're
Sure.
building actuary tables over time saying, hey, we've noticed that people who have MDR way less likely to get hit with a cyber attack than people who don't. So we might require that or we might offer discounts for having it, but that's the precision that we're starting to see. Carriers are honing in on the security controls that they are seeing are leading to less claims because cyber
Right.
insurance is organized gambling, right? So
Yep.
it's less claims equals less payout, which means our company makes money, not us, but
Yeah.
the carrier makes money, right? That's the
Yep.
goal. So that's the that's kind of one piece I wanted to bring up there. But um so what about recently, Andy? I know you recently worked on some stuff with a small business specifically
Mhm.
around securing cyber insurance for their business. Were there
Right.
any steps that you and the MSP and the client took, and Wilson, who would have
Yeah.
been on here to talk about that too?
Right.
What are
Right.
some of the things that happened to really make cyber insurance easier to get?
Yeah, and I don't. Before we go into that, I don't want to throw out like Chuck just made a great point in the comments. He said we've not found any
Oh,
unreasonable cybersecurity insurance apps that are wildly unrealistic. And like to that point, like I always like to relate this to
I don't think it'll
property
fit on
and
here. It might be too long.
yeah, yeah,
We tried.
yeah, we tried. But seriously, like the point that it says haven't found any unreasonable cybersecurity apps that are wildly unrealistic. I always relate it to property insurance because property insurance is understandable for people, right? If you had a building and it didn't have an exit sign and it didn't have sprinklers and it had a roof made out of matchsticks And the insurance carrier went, hey, we're not going to write that until you make some adjustments. Everybody knows that building's a fire risk, right? And people might die in that fire, right? So nobody's going to sit there and go, oh, I can't believe that I got to invest in exit signs and sprinkler system and a metal roof, right? They're just going to go do it, right, to get insurance. Well, because people don't understand cybersecurity, if a company comes in and goes, no, we need you to have MFA and we want you to have, an IR plan and securely, or in security awareness training, because people don't understand that and they don't understand the losses associated with it, they fuzz at it and think that it's unreasonable. So
Yep.
it really, and I mean, I'm not trying to take a high horse, or a condemnative stance here, but it really does come down to the ignorance of the insured. They just don't understand the relationship between those controls and the losses that we're seeing.
Well,
So go ahead.
the interesting thing there, though, like to Chuck's point, but also counter to Chuck's point a little bit, some carrier apps, it's not necessarily the apps that are unrealistic, because I think some of the apps are entirely ridiculous, right? Some of them are the ransomware supplementals that exist out there are asking questions that in the cybersecurity space are dumb. They're making gray area questions very black and white. They are asking about way more security controls than maybe the average small business might even have the ability to afford. And it's not that the requirements are not unrealistic. The lack of clarity between what matters and what's required versus what the carrier is asking, and this is a lot of those questions are data collection points, because again,
Right.
they need to see that if a person has this control versus a person who doesn't, were more claims filed for one, and it just helps them build that data, right? So a lot of times, if you were to just look at some of these apps, if you were like, my client needs all these things before they can even get a policy, no, it's not that. A lot of it's data collection. So that, just wanted to put that out there. So go ahead,
That's
Andy.
good. Yeah, no, I'm just so kind of where sorry, and I derailed us, but going back to that to the case study about the small business, it was a retailer focused on outdoor equipment, right? Didn't have
Yep.
cyber insurance, right? They single location warehouse, had been smaller, but had recently grown. I mean, a lot of that outdoor stuff really blew up post COVID, right? And we've seen a lot of higher revenues. I mean, we've got one here locally in Northeast Arkansas that's probably 4 times the size of what it was before COVID. So higher revenue now, roughly around 20 million, right? Hadn't had insurance before because it was that whole idea. We're just a small business. We're kind of rural, well, the MSP, this is where the MSP did a phenomenal job, right? They came in and they were like, hey guys, look, you've got a ton of eggs in one basket, right? Like you've got $18.5 million in revenue that are resting on a single location and a single network. If that goes down, it's not good, right? And insurance can indemnify you for that. Well, even to that point, they were willing to have an initial conversation, but they really didn't want to go through a full diagnostic check. They didn't want to fill out Lord of the Apps. They didn't want to go, it was a waste of time, all that stuff. So we kind of got some baseline quotes. There are some markets out there where you don't have to have all the information. You just have some of it and you can get an initial quote, right? Well, the first quote came in around $5,000. Had a ton of sublimits. There were lower coverages, essentially because the carrier didn't know. And if they don't know, they're not going to fully cover you, right? And then we had one that was more comprehensive, and based on the sector and where they were at, with everything. They were good with offering comprehensive coverage, but it was like almost $9,000, right? Like it was almost double the premium. So the client took the initial call with Wilson. Wilson did his normal thing, educated, said, here's kind of where you're at. You're between 4 and 10-ish on premium. And they were like, well, we'd really like to be on the bottom end of that. And he said, okay, but the coverages aren't there. And he explained to him, again, for the third time, loss quantification, right? And they said, okay, fine. We'll do the deep dive. We'll do the comprehensive app. They went through load up. Well, out of that came that in the last year, they had purchased EDR and they had put on a secure email gateway. Well, the particular carrier, and this is an interesting thing, guys, like for those of you that are out there on listening in the world that aren't insurance nerds, every carrier has the autonomy to do whatever they want to do, right? So like one carrier may hear the word secure email gateway and go, whatever. One other one might hear
They'll say, what's that?
Yeah, they may give you a 20% discount, right? Or they may cut your deductible in half. Like they can do whatever they want to, right? So with the carrier that was involved, as we got through LODA and we found out these things, they had made some investments. Well, the carrier came back and they said, you know what? Now that we've gauged this, we do feel like it is a better risk and we're willing to go full terms for $4,700. So they got every bit of insurance that we could offer at the highest limits for a cheaper premium than the original kind of base policy with sublimits and exclusions came in. And it was all because the MSP educated them, told them what their exposure was, brought them in. We had that initial consultation. We quantified their risk. We explained to them what insurance did. And then they did their part by filling out and fully, attesting to what their investments had been in cybersecurity. And at the end of the day, you get a fully covered business with an understanding of what their loss potential is. And they're paying, guys, for $18 million in revenue, they were paying less than $400 a month for insurance. Like, you can't beat
Easy
that.
peasy. It's awesome. So yeah, that I think is a very clear piece of what we're getting at here, is that the barrier to entry is real. There is a lift to get cyber insurance, but if you're willing to put in the work, like Andy was saying, where like, hey, bring in someone who can actually review your risk, who can actually look at your cybersecurity from the lens of an insurance carrier, who can do these things alongside your MSP, so that the three of you can work together to make sure you're getting a policy that covers you properly, but also that's affordable. Because carriers, I loved what you said, Andy, the carriers have the autonomy to do whatever the heck they want, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even though we're in a hardening market, it's not hard yet, but it's hardening, carriers are still competitive, right? So if you're a good risk, which once you have EDR and secure email gateway, you just went from being an okay risk to a much better one. So they're willing to compete, right? And that's something we need to keep in mind, that access is super important. If you're only accessing 3 or 4 carriers, you're in a rough spot. So being able to access as many as you can, great opportunity, as many good ones as you can. Let's put a qualifier on that. But anyway, last thing I want to hit on before we get going here, and this is less of a cyber insurance misconception thing and kind of more of a guidance piece. And this is going all the way back to what we talked about at the beginning. Cyber insurance requirements. Does your MSP mandate that clients have cyber insurance? And I wanted to talk about this because this is becoming more and more common in the space. And I think MSPs are getting a lot of differing perspectives on what is okay to mandate, what's okay to require, can we recommend it? And here's the thing, right? You can do whatever you want when it comes to recommending or requiring cyber insurance. Where I think the requirement, I'm not a lawyer, so don't hold me to this, but where I think the requirement piece kind of gets into gray areas is when you say, hey, we require that you carry X limits on your policy.
That's it.
Here's why this is the issue, right? And I had a comment on one of my posts in the past couple of days that really got me thinking about this. Let's say you require cyber insurance for your clients, right? To Andy's point before, you have massively different risks out there. You've got different revenue tiers. You've got harder hit industries, which become riskier industries, which carriers would charge more for, but also probably see greater losses. There's a lot of elements and pieces that go into how much coverage you as a business should carry and what type of coverage you should carry, right? And so to simply say, oh, you need $1 million in coverage, well, now there's two sides to that. You could have someone who's 50 million in revenue a year going out and getting $1 million policy, which is not enough. I'm just going to say that. You have the other side where there are a lot of different kinds of $1 million limit policies out there. There are ones that cover everything, and there are ones that only cover a little bit at $1 million, right? So just blanketly saying carry $1 million doesn't really mean that they're actually covered, right? So that's the piece. If you're going to recommend or require for MSPs, one of the things that I want you to take away is that, or that I've observed, right, is it's more important to help your clients and make sure your clients understand, I think you understand, that, oh, there's that train again.
Oh.
No, it's nice. It's telling us it's time to wrap up. But last piece here. So if you are requiring or recommending cyber insurance from your clients, it's really important that you and them understand what their coverage is actually doing for them, right? It's less about saying, hey, you need to have these limits, and more about saying you need to carry limits that adequately protect you, right? So how do you do that? Obviously you can bring us in, work with a cyber agent, know what you're doing, but I think that's really your key. Don't just say, what limits should I work about? What sort of limits fit the risk of my individual clients on an individual basis? Going back to the case study Andy just brought.
Loss quantification? So that's 4 times now that we've brought. Okay,
big
just
words.
making sure. So it might be important.
Right. Yeah, going back to that case study, right? You have a small business. who's like, I don't really want to go through all this stuff. And it's like, well, you probably should, because here's why, right? You could also have a really large business that's like, oh, 500,000 in coverage isn't enough for me. It's like,
Mm.
let's talk, right? So it's really that, and that's the cybersecurity strategy piece of it. Is that cyber insurance helps fund a lot of that incident response stuff. It's a major part of response and recovery. So you want your clients to actually be able to respond and recover to an incident, and a big part of that's kind of tabletopping through what they currently have in coverage. Any thoughts on that, Andy, before we wrap up here?
Well, first of all, the first thing that came to my mind is if you're an MSP and you're out there and you're not operating under an MSA with your clients, you need to go call a lawyer tomorrow. We have E&O providers that we deal with, that if you're not only if you don't have an MSA, but if your MSA is not top tier, like if it's not a really good MSA in their eyes, then they're not even going to offer E&O insurance. They won't even consider you, right? So number one, MSA contracts, things like that are good. If you do write cyber insurance, I think you're dead spot on. Up to you whether or not you put it in there, but know that the human experience. I always think about Jennifer Aniston in Office Space, right? She worked at Tchotchke's, and her boss said, 15 pieces of flair. Well, how many pieces of flair did Jennifer put on? By God, 15. That's all she was required to do, right? And then whenever he came down, I was like, I did what you told me to do. That's a human experience, right? Like that's how the vast majority of us are wired. I coach junior high baseball. If we go into practice and I say, hey, I want us to get 50 swings today, guess what most of my players are going to do? They're going to get 50 swings. We don't have guys out there just trying to get 100 every single time. It's the human experience. So if you require that they have 1,000,000, you better be ready for them to just go buy 1,000,000, even if they need 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So I think
Yep.
that's a great point.
Good word. Cool. So there are a lot more things out there, and I'm sure we could cover a lot more. And we probably will at some point. But for now, we're at 2:50 Eastern. We're gonna wrap up here. I always never really know how to end these things. So all that's to say, have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks so much for jumping in here, and we will catch you soon.
Take it easy, guys.